Hello, everybody. It's very nice to be here. I was actually thrilled to listen to Miro's presentation because there's so many similarities to what we do at Fireframe. So if I could get some slides, maybe we get started. So the name of the speech is Creative Crossroads, Games, Films, and Evolution of Story Tools. So what I want to talk about a little bit is kind of like a transition from a gaming career to a film career. So my background, I'm currently working in a company called Fireframe, which is founded roughly 5 years ago. My personal background is from very strong gaming background. So I'm an old school nerd. We founded a company called Sumea back in 1999, which became one of the biggest mobile gaming companies in Finland. There was a bunch of really nice people, for example, the founders of Supercell were part of our team. And we ran the company for 10 years, and we focused very much on the early mobile gaming devices. And also because the whole gaming industry was so new back in the day, so we had to kind of invent as we go these kind of playing rules and try to find the ways to build kind of business out of these mobile devices that were very, very simple back in the days. And then due to technology getting better and better, we were able to start actually making stuff that is actually fun to play instead of just being able to get it run and get it sold. So so I'm transitioning from that kind of background into very, very high-end filmmaking, and it's been a very, very interesting process. So Fireframe is practically a virtual production studio. So what does this mean? So I think the important thing to note here is that since the technology is getting better, the creative abilities for people are they're opening up to everybody. And we basically let me start from the beginning. So Mikko Kodisoja, who is the founder of Fireframe, was the other founder of Supercell, and he had two different dreams in his life. So what he wanted to do was either games or films. And then when we split up from the Sumea team, Mikko ended up finding Supercell. And then he did pretty okay there, I think, compared to an average average gaming company. So he got super bored at some point, and apart from designing his super fancy ass apartment in Turku, he also started secretly planning for this kind of a gaming company merged with film production company, and this is how Fireframe started. So I actually was working on my own gaming company 5 years ago called Combo Breaker. We were working on a pretty big football game project. But then they were I had this feeling that I could do something else for the change than just work on the gaming. And then I called Mikko that, hey, let's go for a beer. Do you have any nice project? And he said, well, I've been planning a little bit. And he had already quit Supercell at that point, and we went for a beer. And then he said that I rented this small place. I'm planning to build a film studio based on virtual production, and I had zero clue what virtual production is back in the days. And he said that have you seen these making of Mandalorian and these kind of super nice scenes where they build this LED studio and run everything on a computer background and merge that with live action stuff? And I was like, fuck yes, this is so cool, I want to do this stuff. And so I gradually started transitioning from my gaming stuff into this. And to be honest, we had zero idea how this thing should be done with me. But then we ended up starting to hire people into the company. So we ended up getting a bunch of people from different types of industries. So naturally, the first choice would be to talk to film and TV and advertisement people who were used to building these projects, used to running projects, knew how this actual business side of things worked, kind of were already somewhat familiar with the production processes and so. And then of course, because this is very VFX heavy stuff, so we needed some VFX people, so we ended up hiring VFX people from traditional VFX companies. Then, of course, we have gaming people such as me and Mikko, for example, kind of like bringing the gaming attitude and thinking into the whole process. Then we have people who have been like running really, really big live shows, like for example, esports World Cup and those kind of things, which are like run with like thousands of people in the like in the whole production. Then very recently we've been like starting to like gather up people who are specialized in the AI part of things. Naturally, because everybody's talking that AI is going to take over the world and like we're all going to be like jobless. And of course we need to like look into that stuff. I disagree, but it's very interesting. Then we have people who have been working on VR and AR stuff. So basically kind of like combining like live show stuff and also building like super big virtual production worlds. And yeah, so this is kind of like the core combination of Fireframe's team. And one thing that I have to notice that this combination is like super hard. The kind of like the world view of these people is so like far apart from each other that combining all these people and making a working company has been extremely hard. But here's the like nice vision that I stole from Adrian, our virtual production supervisor. Thank him for this one. Here's our team. We have roughly 15 people in-house now, but in reality, when the actual production start, we have up to like 100 people working on a single product. There's some examples of projects that we've been already working on. The first one, Rare Grand Alignment, is our first full-length film that is like, I'd say 90% produced in our own studio. It's coming out hopefully soon. Then there's a couple of like TV series like Akulohimie's Conflict and Yle's Last Break, which was like super successful. Some Norwegian co-productions like Kraken, which is a full-length feature film. The total number of productions that we've been running is maybe like close to like 60 or 70 or something. So we've been working a lot with like Finnish commercials, short films, TV series, and most of that stuff has been like a really, really good learning experience for us. But now we've like made the change in the strategy. So basically, here's some of the like kind of like the productions and teams and companies that we work with. Also partially from like music production side, like music videos, all kinds of stuff. But since we built our own studio, the first thing we wanted to do was like to learn how this thing is actually done. And we spent like good like maybe 3.5, 4 years actually just like doing productions for other clients so that we can get the grasp of how these things actually are run. So the first thing that we did was we rented a big space from Konala and we built this like huge LED volume in there. This is like probably one of the biggest in the Nordics and also in the Europe. So this is basically similar set to what Disney, for example, is using for, or ILM is using for Mandalorian. A little bit like higher quality panels, smaller stage, but like very, very high-end tech. And then when we noticed that like we want to move more into our own productions, we also noticed that we're going to need like a separate kind of like production facility for the rest of the stuff. So we ended up buying the whole building where we are now, and we built like the biggest Chroma studio in Europe, I think, which has also the like possibility to like, you know, do stunt rigs and all kinds of crazy stuff, full like virtual production tracking also on the Chroma stage. We've been already using this for real productions, and we are now starting a couple of productions that are actually going to be like very much shot also on this Chroma stage, but this is still work in progress. So one of the like key changes that we did like a while ago was that we want to like actually produce all of the content immersive first. What does it mean? Well, the movie industry is like extremely competitive area. So we need to somehow to be able to separate from the big film studios who have like 100 million budgets. And one way to do that would be to like aim directly into these like ScreenX and other like kind of like immersive production like environments. partially also to VR, but like more into these like big screens kind of thing. And this doesn't only mean the film side. So there's basically like, I would say that we want to take control of the whole pipeline. So the thing here is that like if you work with like, let's say, traditional film side clients, you only have to like do what they ask you for, and you can't give any creative input, but hey, if we do it like this or this or this, it would be so much cooler. So we wanted to actually start doing the whole thing like basically from scratch, from the very beginning to the actual like publishing process. And there's like two reasons for that. The first one is the creative control, and the second reason is that way we can cut off the middlemen in several places. Because, like I said, the film industry is super competitive, and there's a lot of like hands taking money from every part of the like process, and we want to avoid that. So that's why we can provide the whole pipeline from the very first like planning stage to the actual like shooting stage, and also like going directly into these like big theaters and talking directly to people, just basically cutting out the publishers if possible. So that's our vision now. And we don't only do cinema stuff. So we are like looking also into these kind of like Apple TV Plus kind of things where you can build like immersive content on phones and stuff like that, like immersive like audio stuff. It starts from like very simple things, you know, you get like haptic feedback on the movies and stuff like that. There isn't that many companies who actually do that, and it's super interesting to be part of like those kind of things. And because the hardware is like not limited to these small things, so we are also looking into these like super big stages like the Sphere kind of things. There's a couple of projects going on now where Mikko has invested heavily. We're building kind of like these immersive center things. I'm not sure how much I can talk about this, but there is a town called Turku in Finland where we're going to build a test system for that. It will hopefully be ready within the next couple of years, but we'll be looking into very much these like kind of like mixed immersive reality experiences. So yes, then how are we actually going to build this film? So we basically set up a film fund, which means that we have now full control and full budget over what we want to build. We are now working on 3 films. One of them is actually like not Fireframe's own IP. The rest 2 of them are, but we are like working with them very closely. So the first and the biggest one is called Dragon Lord. It's made by Swedish film director David Sandberg, who's maybe famous for making a super successful indie film called Kung Fury, maybe like 8 years ago, and it became the most viewed indie flicks. And it has like a huge fan base. The whole story is absolutely crazy stuff. It's like, you know, his friend came over and he said that like, you know, guys, I know what we call this film. And he said, this is He-Man on steroids. And I actually agree on that one. So David is like super talented. He's been like super like successful. He's made like kind of like super big also like commercials and stuff like that, and he has very, very clear vision on how things should look like. I'm going to show like a short clip of the first test that we did with David with Dragon Lord as the last thing. Then the second title is called Puzzlebox. This is like Mikko's own script, so he wanted to like become a script writer, and he wanted to like, you know, test his abilities to write a proper like film script. Of course, it's nice to have money. You can play with this kind of stuff. But he's been writing Puzzlebox now for like roughly 6 months. We have already started the production on this one. This is kind of like a genre horror film kind of thing with very specific and narrow kind of like area of interest. And it's very well designed to suit kind of like virtual production and LED studio production. Top Floor is a collaboration film which is also like from ground up designed to be working on a virtual production film set. So naturally, now that we have those stages, we want to utilize them as much as possible. So I want to talk about like a couple of things like when I transitioned from the gaming stuff to like film stuff. One of the key things that really struck me was the like structural differences. So if you look at like a typical film production crew, everything like starts naturally like from the idea. When a script has been approved, the production company usually starts looking for people who are suitable for doing this type of film. So there's practically like a separation between like above the line and below the line crew. So what does that actually mean? So first you need to find a director for the film. You validate through like how much do we have budget? Can we get this big name guy who's been working on this for this one? Then the director basically like sets up, kind of like his own team based on people that he wants to work with. So a lot of this stuff is actually like assembled on the go. So there isn't like a similar thing to gaming company where you have like, bunch of nice people that you want to work with. They actually like build these teams pretty much on the fly. then they built these like kind of like different departments where they usually choose like heads of departments who then have their own team that they want to work with. And the whole production is like kind of like super big in that sense that like it usually producers just like doing huge amounts of breakdowns, like what kind of shots do we need? Do we need like VFX shots? Where are these going to be shot? How much does it cost? What kind of people can we afford? Where do we find those people? Like they need to like reach out to millions of different places to pull this thing together. And for example, now for our own productions, our producers, they are like sweating like crazy so that they can just, get the whole process started. Then after basically the kind of like the right kind of people have been found, then they are kind of like assembled and these like things are discussed and then kind of like there's kind of like this kind of like reach out process where we find that if this team is actually able to pull this thing together. And one thing about this that is really, really striking to me is that like this is super hierarchical stuff. So in the gaming companies, like everybody is friends with each other. And when you go into this, there's like, a really, really tight, like, I'm the boss hierarchy. And you don't go to talk to random people from the other departments. It was like super weird for me to go into a film set for the first time, gaming from the game side. And like, I'm like, yeah, I'm friends with everybody. And, I got that bad looks that what the fuck are you doing in here? Like, you don't talk to these people apart from your supervisor. And they will handle the discussion. It's super weird. And this is what we want to change in Fireframe, that like, because there's so much good in this kind of like equality in the gaming side compared to the film side. But we're now dealing with an industry that is like 100 years old and it's like super established. It's a machine that is designed to run like super lubricated. If one part breaks, the whole thing breaks. And the production like days are so expensive that it just has to work. So this is why it's like this. And then one thing that we're bringing in that is a bit like hard is that we are now like a virtual production house. Our VP department is super small. We have just a bunch of people working in there. But like traditional film people, they don't even know what virtual production is. There's like people where we have to go and teach them that, hey, we have this cool system. We utilize this. And they're like, oh, really? Oh, this is so cool. Like we had, for example, Spike Lee, who's a pretty big name producer, like he came into the studio and he was like, he didn't like really understand what we were talking about until we showed it to him. And then he was like, wow, this is so cool. Imagine what you could do with this stuff. Guy who's been making films for like, 50 years, like super big ones. Gaming hierarchies, they are flat. Like this is like a pretty typical gaming company kind of like structure. And of course there's the Supercell way that like, the teams decide everything. Okay, this is like, in reality, this is partially, I think, a pipe dream. If you have like billions of money, you can do this kind of stuff, but you need some kind of organization. Ilkka gave like a really nice presentation of this in one of our company events, and we want to change more into this direction, but definitely not into this super hierarchical thing. So then I'll talk a little bit about the VP process. So in a traditional film production, like if you go and shoot like a traditional film, it all starts with like a nice story. So the story is the key. When you have a really nice script, then people actually like, hopefully by like a named scriptwriter, then people start believing in this stuff. Nothing goes anywhere without a good story. So it goes through like multiple processes where it's evaluated like several times, like if it's like worth doing this, is it a good story? Does it bring something unique? Does it fit some specific genre? What would be the audience? That kind of thing. Then let's say that like when the story is passing like through all these like iterations, then starts the preparation. So the producers take over. They start actually like scouting for locations. They start scouting for the teams. They start the actual kind of like construction planning parts of things. This is a long process. It can take like 2 years easily, like into a single film. Just mainly because, like as an example now for Dragonlord, there's probably going to be like at least like 4 to 5 different locations where we're going to shoot 1,500 VFX shots. Each one of them has to be broken down. They have to be kind of like very specifically like measured, like if we do it like this, how much does it cost? If we do it in this way, how much does it cost? Like that. And then we have to like pull out like it within the budget and with the probability that we can actually like pull this thing together. Then when we're through that, the live action shoot starts, which means that like the film crew goes into location with the actors. There's like very heavy shooting days usually, like everything has to, these are the days where everything has to work. They're extremely like stressful, expensive, also like usually like super long. There's like limitations on like if you have child actors, you can only do like 6 hours a day. You have a lot of like, if you have like super divas in the like sets, you have to treat them really well. You have to have like really like hard and talented people working on those ones. Then when the live action shoot has been done, the whole thing is packaged and sent to like usually VFX vendors who do the post-production work. So they do the like hard work for adding the monsters and comping the stuff and making it look like super nice. It is usually a super expensive part, especially for modern films. Then they bounce it together with the editor, so they actually might like drop some cuts if it seems like we can't pull this together. But it's very much in the hands of the post-production department from that on. Then when everybody is happy, the director says, yeah, I'm happy, then it goes into the actual like distribution, usually through some bigger publisher. What changes in virtual production is that like we try to engage the director and the writer from the very beginning. So it starts from thinking that if we do parts of this thing in the studio, how can we change this? And it requires actually like usually very big changes in the script itself. So for example, these films that we are working on now, for Dragonlord, we went like a full walkthrough of the whole script, which took 5 days. And we were trying to figure out like, where can we do this part of the film? If we change this one, can we do it in the studio? Because it's usually cheaper to do in the studio than the location than the traditional. So it's super important that the crew that you're working with is aware of the like possibilities of doing stuff with game engines and VP stuff. Then basically we throw the same like modified script into kind of like this internal review process where we go through things and think like, okay, we can do this part in Unreal. Let's suggest this, blah, 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 this kind of thing. So it's more like a rotating loop than an actual like kind of like step-by-step process. And we talk to the VFX vendors. What do you think? Is this feasible? Can you guys do this kind of thing? Then we have this VAD is called like basically virtual art department that is basically consisting of people who build the sets for the virtual studio and the sets for the actual like LED volume, for example. And after that cycle has been completed enough times, like a lot of pre-production time, then we go into this like kind of like actual like place where we start building the sets in the studio and we start the shooting and we start like kind of like iterating and testing stuff. So we have a lot more freedom over things due to this. And then basically already at this point, like from the first versions of the shoots, we can make like an edit for the whole film, which is very interesting because like there's usually like already like placeholder VFX, placeholder graphics, already like in some places like ready-made graphics for the background. So you can already like make a cut of the film and see, is this actually going to work? And then we can bounce it back if needed. And then after that one is like finished, then it goes to post like to the VFX vendors and it's pushed out. So here's actually a slide stolen from Epic, so I'll just go through this. So this is the same thing. There's one thing that is missing from that one. It's called pitch whiz, which means that basically it's possible to like kind of like visualize the whole mood of the film beforehand, like after the script, just by like gathering a small team and making like talking with the director that how do you want this thing to look like? So like a brief example, hopefully this video plays. It doesn't. Can somebody press play?
Built an Unreal Engine. So the first thing I did was reach out to the game developers to send me over some key assets, which I then put together a quick pitch.
Visualization like this. This is how I want the mood of the film to be.
The great thing about Unreal, you should.
So depending on the budget, you can like spend a little bit of money on this to find the kind of like the correct type of like mood, so to say. This is of course like a bigger production, so they have probably spent like a few $100,000 for this one already. Then the next thing is that then we go into this process where I was talking about that it goes through these like pre-visualization departments, virtual art departments, VFX department, all of this stuff. So the script and these like pitch decks are going to those people. Then starts the actual previs process, which is very interesting, so that like we try to replicate parts of the film directly inside the engine. So I'll show an example from there. So here's an example. This is half running on the engine, and then it's like compared to the actual shot. So these kind of things would be like extremely hard to do in any other way than actually like trying them first in the engine, because shoots like this are extremely expensive. So then you can like just kind of like try out that like, okay, if we have a dragon in here, how would it look like in the film? Before we actually spend like $500,000 on the actual VFX, just to see if it's working as like part of the story. And this is what we are now doing a lot. So for example, for Dragonlord, we spent 1 year just making the previs. And then what ended up happening was that the director wasn't actually like happy in the like mixture between the traditional storyboard and the previs. So we ended up ditching the whole year of previs and just going with the storyboards. But like the other way would have been that we started like actually shooting this stuff and figuring out like, you know, the traditional way, but it would have cost even more than that. So that's why this is a nice approach. You can also like start prevising the sets, like for example in these kind of cases where you have like complicated complicated scenes and you just want to get the look and feel and maybe like do some quick comping on top of that, you can do that now. So you can build these complicated sets and show these to the director, show these to the crew, make sure that they agree with the vision that the team is having. And this is like so much faster to do in Unreal than in any other tool that we have currently. And you can like preview camera angles, you can do lens choices, you can do lighting tests, you can do like whatever, like kind of like, does this part actually fill in anything for the story kind of tests with these ones super quickly. Then after that stage, we are usually going into this kind of like stunt viz / tech viz thing, which is kind of like a technical review of how feasible are these things to do. So let's imagine that you have a complicated, like let's see, action sequence where you have 10 cars driving somewhere and you have like super complicated camera rigs and you have to like the space you need it. What kind of like environment do you need for it? What kind of hardware do you need for it? What kind of team do you need for it? So all of that stuff is like super easy to kind of like, or super easy to actually like previs inside the gaming engines. So you get all kinds of like measurements. You know, you can do physics simulations. You can do kind of like let's say that you built like a stunt rig where you have like a huge like motor arm in that. You can simulate all that stuff beforehand and see like, okay, this is going to break if I drive this car like this. So that's why you built these kind of like visualizations before. So here's a good example of those ones. You just basically built the whole kind of like craft environment inside Unreal, and then you basically like also visualize that if we want to do like, you know, studio shot, here's our volume, what do we need to build as an actual prop, what can we build on the volume, how much space do we have in the studio, do we have anything that blocks the like director's vision, can we do this and this kind of shot in the studio at all. For example, in our studio, because the space is pretty limited, you can't do super wide shots because you run out of the LED volume stage. So we are building all of these like pre-visualizations before we actually start doing anything. Here's an example of like this like stunt visualization thing. So you can actually like kind of like do all of these things beforehand. You can build this with any kinds of tools that you can imagine, like VR tools, AR tools, Unreal, simulation software, Houdini, whatever you want to use. And you can like kind of like previs these complex driving sequences and stuff like that before you actually start doing that. Yep. So then we go into the actual shoots, and this is the interesting thing. So one of the reasons, like I mentioned, we work quite a lot with like kind of like external productions just to learn how this part of the process goes. So this is where the kind of like the combined effort of different teams is pulled together. So it usually starts with like very careful like planning on how do we build the sets. So basically the kind of like the set build department comes to the studio and they, for example, build a physical set for a couple of days. We like view the camera angles. How does this look through this actual like live, like real life set that we built? We take the like environments that the VAD has built for Unreal. We make sure that everything runs technically. It has to run smoothly. It has to like blend in with the foreground. That's a lot of like work to get it looking realistic, because although the current rendering engines, they are really good, but they're still like kind of like a little bit of technical limitation on how realistic you can get stuff to look on them. Then basically we have the lighting crew who comes and lights the whole foreground set, and then we like try to match that stuff with the lighting of the like background set naturally. Depending on the team, there's people who are used to now working with these virtual production sets, and we can like hook, for example, their like lighting systems directly into Unreal, so we get the like really nice blend, and they get control over how the like virtual set looks, and so they can do the lighting on that one also. And then like basically when everything is prepared, then the shooting starts and the like rest of the crew walks in, and that's when it gets like usually like super tense because the timing is super tight. The director is usually like under a lot of pressure. Everything just has to work. So this is, for example, where we are like under a lot of pressure. So here's an example from like a set thing. So we can move stuff around in the virtual set, we can move stuff around in the real set, and the nice thing is that you can get basically everything in the camera on the fly. So you can also like preview stuff on, for example, the green screen, but then you end up like getting stuff like this where the background is actually like a virtual set and there's a lot of like people on the front with the like real sets. And then basically you just like shoot with the camera, and what you get is like what goes into post-production, instead of having to imagine how it will look like. Then after the shooting days, stuff goes into a thing called post-vis, which means basically it's kind of like prepared for the post-production. So we can do that part like partially in-house. So what does it practically mean? When we have like something shot in the Chroma, instead of like directly sending this stuff into like post-production house, we can preview stuff in Unreal. So we can just basically like, you know, really quickly like mock up. This is similar maybe like to what Remedy is doing, in that sense that like you can like comp plates inside a gaming engine with the live action footage, and then you can get like kind of like stuff that already looks close to what we want, and then we can verify that what we have done is right before it gets sent into post-production. Why are we doing this? So one thing is like that this is a little bit cheaper way to do stuff if you do it correctly. So if we think about the first step, okay, this doesn't say, but the first step is kind of like the script and planning stage. So in a traditional way, that one is like usually a little bit cheaper than in the virtual production. So here we need to like involve the script writers, practically the whole crew a lot more already, so that we get the script kind of like virtual production ready. So it's a little bit more costly in here than in traditional production. The thing that is definitely more costly in our setup is the pre-production because of all the planning that is needed. So if you don't plan this stuff carefully enough in this stage, you're going to like mess up big time, and then you have to kind of like fall back into the traditional production method, and then you end up like burning a lot of money. So this is why we want to make sure that the pre-production / development part is done extremely well. So we allocate a lot more budget into that part. The production part itself is a little bit cheaper, mainly due to the fact that like we can save on, for example, we don't have to like fly people into locations. That's expensive as hell. We don't have to build like bigger sets. That's also very expensive. So we can like cheat on the virtual side of things, and that's a lot of like saving. Then where the biggest savings usually come from is the post-production part. So practically, because we already have a lot of the like VFX done in the in-cam stuff, you have to do a lot less post-production. It doesn't mean that you can skip it completely, not even close, depending on the project, but you can have huge savings in there. So that's why it's important to have this thing on the loop. And then the rest of the distribution, okay, that's like pretty much the similar thing to like traditional. So just briefly about the tools that we use. So we are pretty much like an Unreal house now. We tried using Unity to a certain degree, and also like custom render engines, stuff like that. But the fact is that Unreal is currently the only one that seems to be working like reasonably decently. It's unfortunately a little bit like Fortnite running all the time. So it's not really made for this stuff, but Epic has been putting a lot of money into Unreal, and they actually talk to people. They've been visiting, for example, us several times. So we have like really good connections to them. And there's like a loads of like third-party tools to Unreal Engine, so which makes it like kind of like easier for people to just get the system up and running. Then, of course, we have the volume, which is kind of like LED panels with custom processors, custom rendering hardware. The nice thing about this is that you can stack basically like as much rendering power as you need. So we are not like limited into these like kind of like, I would say, technical things so much as in the gaming. So you can always have the like very cutting edge stuff, which is nice. The system that we're using for camera tracking in the volume is called OptiTrack. So it's basically tracking where the actual cameras are, and then it's like project, like kind of like telling the rendering engine to project the graphics into the volume in the like correct perspective, so you get like kind of like this immersion thing. Then we do traditional mocap. So for that one, we're using either the OptiTrack system for like complex stuff, or Xsense, or some AI mocap tools like Mescapade and those ones. So for example, for Dragonlord, there will be a lot of stunts, so we still need to figure out what's the best way to capture stunts. We actually like also briefly spoke to Remedy, and we have some insights also from guys from there. Then the project management side. So we are using Perforce for Unreal so that we can basically kind of like bounce around the whole scene between the LED stage and the team that is working on these ones. So this is pretty similar to like whatever like gaming company development. So practically you keep the project shared between people, and then you have like kind of like a dedicated like setup for the volume where you can just pull the latest changes that the artists have made, and we can like push the stuff to the screen with one button basically. Then we work a lot with the traditional VFX tools. This is mainly for the like scene building side. So we have a lot of Blender guys in the house. We have now like hired a couple of guys who come from this like really high-end VFX industry, and those guys are all about like Houdini and Nuke kind of thing, and they're like terrified about the fact that who are these fucking amateurs working on Blender. We are building our own pipeline, which is like kind of like close to a traditional VFX pipeline in that sense that like we want to like basically integrate similar workflow to these like big VFX houses where practically we can integrate stuff from external vendors and also our own stuff and keep track of everything. So we build our own custom pipeline on top of Aeon, which is an open source platform, and then we integrate it with ShotGrid, which means practically like that the kind of like the higher level guys can actually track the progress of things from there, and they talk to each other, and we built like some custom tools for those. And then, like I mentioned, we are looking heavily into AI. I'm practically the AI department of the company at the moment. I'm very much like pro AI, but I've had to like give up to the fact that like it's not simply like the all salvaging thing, unfortunately. And also it's a good thing because it keeps people like actually their jobs. I'll just briefly tell a few words about the AI efforts that we've been making. So one of the key problems why this is so hard in the film industry, I would say that like if you follow this like AI X/ whatever like threads things where people are that filmmaking is dead, do everything with AI, these new tools are so great, then you actually start to like talk to a director and try to pull together something that the director wants exactly. You can't get it. That's the problem. You can do like commercials, you can do stuff that looks extremely nice, you can do like parts of, you can do backgrounds, you can do like pretty high quality 3D models. But like the thing is that the directors usually have a very specific vision on how certain things should look like. Like, for example, here on the top right corner, I tried doing some tests about the Dragonlord character, just like on some like, you know, AI mock-up background. Just getting the guy to turn like this and walking towards the volcano. In every fucking shot, the character looks a little bit different, even no matter what tool you use. Because like it's not trained with like this kind of like, you can, of course you can build LoRa's, but even that one doesn't go like close enough. So then the problem is that like, we can't use this for like the main characters at all, because like they have to be extremely like close to what the director wants. Okay, then I in the very beginning, I started like trying to build like Gaussian splats using like, so that I get like one image, then I threw like an AI generated 360 video and build a splat from there. It works from like very limited angles and then it starts exploding. So there's these kind of like problems. There are very nice tools now that are getting closer to that, but we're still not there. Then for 3D model generation, there's now a couple of like really good models that do pretty nice like medium polygon stuff. The problem with them is that usually the textures are all over the place and the topology is all over the place. So somebody needs to manually retouch these anyway and make sure that they are like kind of like into the film grade. So the hard thing is that for gaming this is nice, but for the film quality stuff, you know, one single character can have like 1 billion polygons and, you know, 40 different like 16K UDIM textures. You can't get that kind of stuff out of the like tools yet, but they are really nice for like kind of like background props, test versions, kind of like as a mock-ups. Some of the stuff that we'll be looking into is now these like kind of like character animation transfer tools, like one, for example. I run some nice tests with David, like he's been like walking like Godzilla in the air, and then we try to like map the characters in there. They start to be working pretty nice. I would expect that within the next like maybe 6 months we can actually start using this. They are already usable for background characters. Then we've been trying stuff like, for example, turning stuff from storyboards, like hand-drawn storyboards into first like kind of like a rendered image. That part is working nicely, but then when you try to actually turn that into a proper 3D model, it's not there yet. So it works properly for like, you know, certain things. There's nice tools like World Labs, for example, which is now trying to do like single image to Gaussian splat kind of things. They are getting there. They got like 200 million funding. So if they don't get there, then nobody will. Then I'll show you a brief example of this AI test that we did. So my friend Kare, like we were like trying to previs this like evil priest thing for one of the films. So I just asked him to like fool around in the hallway, and this is what ended up on. So this is how close we can now get like with this previous stuff, but this is nowhere near production ready. This is my work. All right, then I'll just briefly show a short test clip from Dragon Lord. This is when we started working with David. He plus a bunch of his team guys came over to our studio. The way that started was that like I had heard of David and was like a super big fan of Kung Fury. So he came over and Mikko called me that, hey, do you know who's David Sandberg? He's coming to the studio. And I was like, yeah, I know who he is. Let's go for a beer. And then we ended up getting like piss drunk, going to karaoke, and then David presented the vision, and then on the next week we struck a deal with him. So then the guys flew over here to our studio, and we had like 1 week. We had one costume that David brought, one miniature model that his friend had built, then some random 3D models, and a lot of like junk that we got from Mikko's friend, and we thought that let's make a really, really quick test shot of what we can build in a week. And this is the result.
White men call him the devil. The Yavapai call him eyes like the sky.
Yes, that's pretty much it. So thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Sami. This is a little bit nuts, right?
This is totally nuts. This has nothing to do with sanity.
I mean, like I have a couple of questions, but the audience has also a chance to pose your questions. We have a mic coming to you, so just raise your hand when you have that. But I'm going to sort of start from my own questions. Like, when you said that you had no understanding of the virtual productions.
Yep.
Like looking at the slides now, how many years there's now from there to this point?
4.5.
So much learning. Like,
yep.
What is the way for a games person to learn all these movie production things? Is it from other people? What do you do to get all of this insight in such a short time?
So basically, I think the key thing for me was that there was people who had already been working on this virtual production stuff and who were like super deep in the VFX stuff. And that's like when I came from like a background where kind of like I thought my real background is like a coder. I haven't written a single line of code for like 4 years now. So I think like
not even the AI.
Well, for the AI some scripting, but that's not real code.
Okay.
But the thing here is that like the main kind of like twisting point for my head was that I had to like understand like how much better the quality needed for the film is than for the games. So like there's so much talk about that, like just go to like Epic Store and buy the assets and make a film. Like if you want to make a good looking film, that's like nowhere close to the thing that you need. And that was like the key for me, was to learn like what kind of tools do you actually need to make this stuff look good.
So it's a little bit opposite for like a 3D modelers learning to make like game fitting assets.
Yeah,
and then you have to like relearn that to another direction.
Exactly, and also trying to find the balance between, because you have to run this stuff on real-time engines, so you can't go into full film quality, but you have to go like somewhere between the game's quality and the like film quality.
Yeah. You need a lot of processing power also for doing that.
Yeah, you do, and then like you need like also like very specific like pipelines to do like stuff like this.
So you already touched on that, and we've been discussing also previous. So you said that it's like a tremendously difficult combination of different disciplines. But how did you manage sort of like trying to everybody to learn each other? Like there's a lot of pain points, I'm pretty sure, with like matching and mismatching lingo, for instance.
I'm going to be completely honest. A lot of people have left.
Right.
So it is super hard to like get these like traditional industry people to like understand what's the nice thing about gaming stuff.
What specifically in game productions is that sort of teases the traditional production teams? Like, what is the most difficult thing to understand?
I think it's the fact that like I think maybe partially the flat hierarchy, and also that like in the traditional VFX industry, like you have the VFX supervisor, and you promise to deliver something in a specific time, and if you do it, you're out. They will like kick you out of the team. So it's like, you don't have much like friendliness in there. Especially, I understand it like if you come from like Hollywood background and like one person like messes up something and like in big scale it affects like the whole thing collapses.
So ultra disposability in a way.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I think
how about the iterative processes? Like in the game industry, again, we're sort of like jamming together in the production. In the same, like I think that the flat hierarchy is sort of also to do with that we want to make sure that every single discipline is contributing to the experience, and we have to communicate between that. So, but how about that, like making changes somewhere? Because it's interesting how it's like bloated in the pre-production.
Yeah, I think like that's the like key nice thing that like people are actually like more open to like give feedback and ideas and bounce around ideas. And like we, for example, started like at some point kind of like these script Fridays where people can bring in their own scripts and can like, kind of like contribute like super heavily in the stuff from the beginning, which is, I think it's super cool. So I think we have some questions.
I just wanted to add to that. So is the iteration in the, like sort of the traditional iteration that goes through all the production in games, is it mostly hosted in the pre-production phase of the movie production here?
Well, I think like people can contribute less in the actual production stage because then it's already locked down. So it's definitely more in the pre-production.
Yeah. Okay. We had a question here, so please wait for the mic.
Yeah. Hey, Perttu Hamalainen, Aalto University. Just curious about this iterative thing, because I came to games from movies in a way. They weren't big movies. It was more of a hobby thing. But I just feel like the industry would have a lot to learn about working with storyboards and iterating less, because a lot of that iteration is just, we don't know what the fuck we are doing. So what's your take on that?
I 100% agree on that one. In one way, it's nice to have like one direction to follow. I don't know if it's just my karma or something, but it seems like if you don't know exactly what you're doing, you end up just like wasting a lot of money, and then having a really nice story and storyboard helps with like people actually verifying that, hey, this is a good thing.
But can we sort of like bring from the games industry iteration like to the pre-visualization, pre-things that so that we can test out ideas with the virtual production and those kind of things so that we can get the look and feel and can then, work on the very kind of fixed storyboarding and the plans?
I think it definitely can work that way, but quite often the directors have like super specific vision. And for example, in our team now, David is like, he's so talented that he can do like, he just grabs like 3D Studio Max and does the like previs himself. So in that sense, it's hard. Like I said, we ended up like wasting like a year doing previs for stuff that the director then in the end thought that I think it doesn't fit that if half of the story is shown in previs and half in storyboards. So we ended up redoing everything in storyboards.
But was there any valuable from the scrapping work?
I think now that, like, for example, Dragon Lord has a new team, they didn't even know that we have that stuff, and they were like amazed that you guys have done so much work already, which is nice. They can like take this into like their learnings. So I think it's not work.
But chiming on Perttu's question, like much older tradition of like fixing the hierarchy and the communication channels and those kind of things. I remember discussing in another occasion with you that there's something also very tempting that the things go very well lubricated and then there's no hiccups in there. Would you like to explore a bit of that? Like the flat organization also means heavy communication needs.
I agree. Like we try to like open the communication in the company as much as possible. I would say that like the main problem compared to like gaming is that like if you open the communication up too much, it ends up being a mess where like everybody's just throwing ideas. To a certain degree, that is good, but then when you lock stuff down, then you have to like stick into that, and then like the communication channel is like closed down, and then the heads of the departments who actually like have to run the team, have to pull this together. They have to have their piece, kind of like thing. I don't know.
Question coming from there? Wait for the mic.
Yes, thank you for the presentation. I'm kind of bouncing from the previous question in a way, and you've gone over through this, like now you've seen kind of the both worlds, the gaming side and the film side, and you've talked about what the film industry could learn from the game industry. But what about the other way around? What would game industry, like overall, benefit from learning from the film industry instead?
We have a student talk coming on Wednesday also.
I would say the kind of like keeping what you promise kind of approach, that you own the responsibility of things. That's one thing, because in gaming, like maybe it's just like those companies that I work with, but it seems like there's a lot of more freedom in like giving estimates and like you can change things on the fly if something doesn't work. But there it's like you promise to deliver this, make it happen, and nobody cares if like
you have to make it.
If you fuck it up, then you fucked it up, and that's it.
Is there? Oh, there's another question coming in. I'm gonna ask in between. Is there sort of like a possibility for actors to be in the kind of pre-production phase to sort of coming? Do you use like sort of like you use mock-ups in the digital realm, but is there any like physical people or things happening in the pre-production as well?
Typically, like for bigger productions, the like film crew is, or the actual actors, they are like they're only on very specific days.
Time, yeah.
And they are expensive as hell.
Yeah.
So they are like from that above the line cost, they are like usually the most expensive part.
Yeah.
So you want to like minimize the amount of time that like they contribute. But for example, David has like nice connections to all kinds of actors, and like for example for his previous film, like Arnold Schwarzenegger called him, "I want to be in your movie," and he like wrote the role for the guy. So that's the kind of like when you get this.
Yeah.
So
we had a question from the audience.
Hi, my name is Wiki, and my major is actually production design, and now I'm minoring in game. And currently I'm working on my thesis, and the topic would be something like the game engine, using game engine in a film, and especially like how can we use game engine in pre-production phase. And so I'm curious, like except for the technical part, like of course you can try camera angles, you can try lighting, all sorts of stuff. Is there like other like game thinking we can bring in into filmmaking by using game engine?
Very good question.
Yeah, this is a really good question. I think like especially like for example the simulation part is interesting, because we built like toys where we can just like play around with the film sets with like Xbox controller and drive around a car and that kind of things. So you end up with like happy accidents if you mess with those kind of things. And also like just for like experimenting on like what kind of crazy stuff you can build like really fast using something like Unreal Engine or like AI tools, and just combining all this stuff and just being like super playful, because it's so much like easier and cheaper with those ones than traditionally. And also I think like it's so easy to build these kind of like virtual camera systems and things. You can just play around with crazy, like I said, camera angles and stuff like that. And in general, just try out things. Like we tried out like things from, for example, from cutting characters from storyboards and merging them with 3D worlds, and then giving the director like a virtual camera and say, play around. He didn't like it.
But we did it. In the game development discipline, we sort of know that making makes ideas.
Yeah.
So that sort of thing could be useful for other disciplines as well.
Absolutely.
So what are your wishes for future hires in sort of like in these kind of productions where games and film comes together? What would you like to see in our education tracks? What kind of things we need to teach for either film side or the game side?
I think like having people who understand both sides and are at least to a certain degree like also technical would be super useful. Because I don't think there's like there's not that many people. Like, for example, I'll give you a practical example. One of the new hires in the company, he's been with us for a year, is Adrian Weber, who's a German guy. He's 27. He's pretty much like straight out of school bench, already done like close to 50 like really big name productions while he's been like studying stuff. He knows everything about everything, super technical, super deep in the film side of things. Been running like big sets. If we find more people like that, like we're in good hands. So.
Yeah, the kind of unicorns.
Yeah, the unicorns. We're like super happy that we found at least one.
We have a lot of talent here in Aalto and other game schools as well. Thank you, Sami, so much for joining
I'll do it like this.
and for your insights for us from the game side to the film side. So yeah.